In the past 8 years, this is the 7th car I've owned, and today I've owned it for 2.5 years, which is by far the longest I've owned a car for the past 10 years. Why is that the case? Well, from the title, this is the best car I have ever owned, and in today's video, I'm gonna give you guys my 2.5 year review and tell you why I love this car so much. On September 15th, we are doing a giveaway to celebrate 50,000 subscribers here on the channel. In collaboration with Zaptec and then partnering up with Polestar as Polestar's recommended home charger, we are giving away 2 Zaptec GO home chargers. To enter, simply subscribe to this channel and comment down below, "I want a Zaptec GO home charger." Thanks Zaptec for sponsoring this video. When the Turismo first came out almost 3 years ago, I thought the exterior design just elevated the Taycan's exterior look to a new level. I really like that raised ride height, even though this car is now set all the way down on its suspension. I love, the black arches, which makes it a little bit more rugged. And this car originally is white, and these rims are originally silver and black painted, but my car has been wrapped in this beautiful yellow with now black details, and the rims are now painted gunmetal, powder coated. And I think this car just looks spectacular, especially in this spec. And I love driving in it around here in the suburbs of Oslo or in the city of Oslo, because the car actually gets a lot of positive attention. Just the other day, a guy gave me a thumbs up. And before I had it wrapped yellow, I actually had it wrapped in this turquoise blue, Tiffany blue, which was really cool. I loved it, and I did the wheels in the same color. A lot of people may think it was just a little bit too extreme, and I can absolutely see that, because either people loved it or people hated it. I remember passing old ladies and they raising their noses and like, I don't really like that at all. So this spec, much more acceptable socially, but I think it just elevates the look of the Taycan. And I haven't seen a yellow Taycan to date in Norway. There are only maybe 10 or 15 around the world painted originally. So I think having this spec just elevates the look of the Taycan Cross Turismo even more, and I think it is, after all these years on the market, still one of the best looking cars period out on the roads. Getting into the Taycan, even though this is the Cross Turismo, you have to drop really low into the cabin. So if you are super tall, that may be an issue. I'm 5'10", 5'11", so just below or about 180 centimeters, average adult in Western Europe. So I'm fine, but it's still low to get into the cabin. But once you're sitting here, that low cockpit feeling, sitting so close to the ground, and also the seat being able to be adjusted very low, just having the dashboard and the interior wrap around you, does feel very special. And there are few, if no other car that actually makes you feel this special. Maybe the e-tron GT has much of the same specialness because it is basically the same car as this. But what I really like about this car, and we're gonna get to the video I dropped the other day where I canceled my EX90 order. I've also recently canceled a Porsche Macan Turbo order. And that has to do with the interior quality, the sense of luxury, the sense of occasion you get in this interior, which in my opinion is rivaled by very few cars. I'm guessing the Rolls-Royce Spectre is probably even more special than this, but that's a car I haven't driven. That's a car that is so much more expensive than this that it's not even a competition. You're not going to consider this and that car up against each other unless you're like super rich and you don't care about money. But either way, this interior is levels beyond anything else I've driven recently. And I've driven most of the most expensive, the newest luxury entries into the electric car market. My specific car has the upgraded leather interior, which was about 50,000 kroners, about 5,000 euros. It also has the 18-way sports seats, which are so comfortable. They're maybe a little bit harsh at first, but my car's now covered almost 44,000 kilometers. They have softened in the cushion and in the leather, and they are super, super comfortable. These are quite an expensive option. I think they're like 2,000 or 3,000 euros. I also have niceties like the seat belts in crayon. I have the Sport Chrono package and with the chrono clock in crayon. I have the Porsche embossed headrest. So I have quite a few options just to elevate this interior just that extra. You can spend a lot more money if you want. You can like do race text, which is Porsche's Alcantara type of material on the roof, a la carte. You can do these in leather, you can do these in leather, you can do the steering wheel column in leather, you can do the seat base in leather, you can do the insides of the doors in leather. There are so many options you can stack on this car to make it even more expensive. You could easily spend 15,000, 20,000 euros more making this interior even more special. But I think getting these sport seats and getting this upgraded leather really elevates the interior, because you have leather on top of the dashboard, beautiful stitch. You have leather here on the center console, all along the armrest and the center console here. You have it down low on the doors, up on the doors. Everywhere you look and touch, it's just beautiful leather. You have it on the steering, on the airbag cover. After driving other cars and hopping back into this, you can really smell that leather, that smell of an expensive Italian handbag. It's just a very special feeling that you don't find in any car. Not even the e-tron GT, you can get this much leather. On top of that, there's a lot of physical buttons, even though the climate is done via a touchscreen here. Also, this infotainment system, it works fine, but you know, it is getting a little bit old now, especially me testing a lot of the new infotainment systems out there. This could, you know, use an upgrade. The screen is maybe a little bit on the small side, but it does work fine. I used it recently for a trip to Trondheim and back. The driver display though, this gauge cluster is still one of the nicest in the business. This wraparound gauge cluster, it is so beautiful. And then just the, you know, the level of quality of the materials, the switch gears, the buttons, the sense of quality in this interior is second to none. I mean, just the clickiness of the buttons, the knobs, the dials, the stalks, all of it feels so darn nice. I don't think there's any car I've driven that has nicer switchgear than Porsche at the moment. This being the entry-level model into the Cross Turismo lineup, the Taycan 4 Cross Turismo. This gets all-wheel drive, so dual electric motors. It also gets 408 horsepower under normal power, but in launch mode, it gets 476 horsepower for a 0 to 100 kilometers an hour time of 5.1 seconds and a top speed of 220 kilometers an hour. It also gets the big battery pack, which is standard on the Cross Turismo. You can't get the Cross Turismo with the small battery pack, so this has a usable capacity of 85 kilowatt hours. This is, of course, the pre-facelifted model, since this car is 2.5 years old. So the new model does get bigger battery. I think the big battery pack there is like 97 kilowatt hours, and the small one is like 82 or 83 kilowatt hours, almost as big as the old big battery pack. It also gets very fast charging, being on an 800 volt architecture. 10 to 80% in 18 or 19 minutes, like reliably. I've done that so many times in this car, and before I had this car, I had an e-tron GT, which did the exact same thing with a peak charging speed of 270 kilowatts. So yeah, it is a awesome electric car on specs, on paper, still, after being on the market for so many years. So this car also has air suspension, which I think also is standard on the Cross Turismo. And it just makes the ride really soft and supple, especially, or even on these 21-inch wheels, which is very, very impressive. I'm driving the car in normal mode now, which is the most comfortable, but usually I like to drive this car in range mode because it looks more badass getting it all the way down on its suspension. But either way, it is comfortable, though in range mode it is a lot more choppy. And when I'm going to drive on bad roads, I usually put it into normal mode. It was also very low in range mode. There's a speed bump here. I used to live up the road here just a few years ago, so this is why I usually film here. Now I live like 7 minutes away from here. But there's a speed bump here that with my e-tron GT I would always touch. So there's a button here I can press to lift the car, and it remembers it in the navigation system, which is really nice. And if they fix the road, you can go and change that. But that's a really nice feature. Once you press the button here, which is the to raise the car, it asks you if it wants the car to remember this location to do it automatically. And this is an automatic location for me. So this car is on huge 21-inch wheels. I think the fronts are like 265s, and then the rear are like 275s. The rears are 305s, 21-inch Pirelli P0, so really aggressive sporty tires. And even though it's on those big wheels, it is very comfortable. It's not as soft and as supple as the e-tron GT, but on the other hand, this is a lot more sporty to drive than the e-tron GT. These two cars do have very different characters, and I keep comparing them because they are built on the same platform. I've owned both cars and they are very closely related. This car though has a more sporty edge once you put it into sport mode. And if I put it into sport mode now, it has sport and it has sport plus, which is really nice. The one thing I wish this car had was one pedal driving or a more aggressive regenerative mode. So it defaults to coasting, and then you have a button here on the steering wheel to put on or turn on the battery regen, which just gives it a little bit of what feels like engine braking. You get used to it, so it's not the worst thing. So now we're gonna go over speed bump in sport mode. And even in sport mode, it's really nice and soft and supple. You can put it into Sport Plus, put it all the way down on a suspension, tighten up steering. This car has a 2-speed transmission, so when you're in range mode or you're in normal mode, it defaults to the highest gear, to the second gear. So if you're driving and you want full throttle, you match the throttle, you can feel it because it is a mechanical gear. It shifts down a gear. So it takes a second, or like a fraction of a second, but it takes like, you feel it. But when you put it into Sport or to Sport Plus, this is also a place where I have the automatic lift. It works really nicely. But when you're in Sport or Sport Plus mode, it defaults to the lowest gear, and then the punch out of this engine, out of this powertrain, is just really, really, really punchy. A few months ago, I was in Sweden with my friend Volvo Christian, and we went to the Volvo factory from the hotel. And we were driving the EX40s all day, 448 horsepower, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, like half a second quicker than this. But this feels quicker because the punch you get from this is so much more immediate. So everything about the driving experience about this car, from the calibration of the throttle pedal, the brake, the way the suspension feels, the body control of the car, the steering weight, the steering feel, all of the controls is so fine-tuned and just adds to that feeling of quality and solidity that you just don't find in any other car. And I'm gonna say this, I think this is probably the best, or one of the best driving electric cars on the market, period. Especially when it comes to the balance between comfort and sportiness. It's just a really nice balance. But when it comes to the dynamic handling of this car, there are few, if no, cars that actually can match it that I have driven. But the steering, though it is one of the best, it is one of the best. I love the steering in this car, and I remember the first time driving a Taycan sedan, like the first 100 meters, I was like, yeah, this is something very different. And it is very different. But I think some of the competitors, especially like the Polestar 3, also the Mercedes EQE sedan 53 AMG, are even better, have more delicacy in the steering. They have more texture. You can feel more of the road and just feel a little bit more responsive. This does, compared to those steerings, feel a little bit numbed down, but just a little bit. So I wouldn't say it is the latest in sharp and sporty steering in an electric car, because I think the Polestar 3 and that Mercedes EQE 53 AMG sedan is better and even more lively. It is still so good. It is still so good. And the combination here with the comfort is just amazing. I have one reservation when it comes to the luxuriness of this car, is that especially on these big wheels, when you go on the motorway, it is very noisy on Norwegian roads. You can, sense that they haven't prioritized outright making this cabin super quiet, because you can hear like stones and stone chips hitting off the wheel arches and the fenders on the inside when you go over some gravel, more than in any other car. So it's not the quietest. And here, going like 60 kilometers an hour, you can hear that road noise. You get used to it, but if you want like an outright luxurious experience, this isn't the car for you in that sense. Earlier this year, I ordered the new Macan Turbo. I made a whole video speccing it, the order process, and then a few months after, I actually canceled the order. After seeing videos coming out on that car, I was disappointed with the way it looked like in more photos and in videos when people got to review it, and also the level of quality of the interior, which is lower than in this car. So for me to go out and buy a Macan Turbo, which is more expensive than this, yes, it is a faster car, but the Macan is going to be a lower entry into the Porsche lineup. It didn't sit right with me spending more money on a car that is lower in the lineup than this, that may not be better to drive, and in the real world, it may not even have more range, because the range of this car in the real world is a lot better than the WLTP numbers would suggest. And I thought spending all of that money like on a car I haven't driven or seen, I didn't want to do that, so I changed my mind. I think that is a very rational decision, especially after sitting on the order, feeling it out for a little while. Is this right? For me, that wasn't right. I may test drive the car later and change my mind. And then the other day, I dropped a video talking about canceling my Volvo EX90 order that I actually put almost 2 years ago. And that was a completely different time for ordering a car in my life and also in the electric car market. A lot of that decision was based on me owning 2 Volvo XC90s here on the channel up until that point in time and loving the Volvo brand and their interiors that came out almost 10 years ago, their new design philosophy. And I've said many years on the channel, when I transitioned to an Audi from my Volvo to the electric e-tron 55 I bought back in 2020, I said the day Volvo are going to launch an electric XC90, I'm going to purchase that. And that's what I did the day after. Hadn't seen the car, hadn't driven the car, hadn't, felt the car. I went out and ordered one. And then 6-7 months later, I got to go to the launch here in Norway. I got to see the car in person. And personally, I was disappointed with the interior quality and that they made it a lot more simple. They dialed down the luxuriness, and also with the options, once I got to, spec out my car, was also a lot less customizable than with the XC90s I had owned. And then I got to drive the Polestar 3, which is a very close competitor, and I got to interact a little with the car, and I wasn't a huge fan of many of the physical buttons being removed and replaced by, sub-menus in the infotainment system. And then I got to drive the Volvo EX30 when that was launched earlier this year, and to me there was a lot of things I didn't like. So I really started to get cold feet about that order, and also spending all of this money because the car had increased almost 20% in price. Interest rates had almost doubled in the past 2 years. And also the used electric car market for a lot of models, especially expensive cars, had crashed. This car a year ago, I could get less than I can get for it used now. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And for that video, I got a lot of positive comments, people very understanding and like, yeah, I wouldn't even go out and order a car without test driving it. But there were a few comments were like just calling me untrustworthy, that I can't trust your videos now, I can't trust your reviews because you changed your mind. And I find that disturbing and hilarious that people have that opinion. And I'm going to get into the point of all of this because it has to do with this car. But I think it makes me more trustworthy and more honest that I can actually change my mind when I get new information. I'm not bound to some kind of dogma that I thought 2 years ago when I ordered the EX90. I've gotten a lot of new information in the time since then, which has made me change my mind and not want to spend 1.2 million kroners on a car that I may not even like to drive or to live with. A lot of the EX30s, safety systems that are buried in different menus were just very annoying to use. Things that this car possesses none of, nothing annoying. And that brings me back to this car. The reason I've owned it for this long is that there hasn't come a car to market that has excited me. I've driven the new Lotus Electra. I drove that, right before New Year's and disappointed in many ways. I think, and I drove this car back to back with that car. I think this drives better. So compared to every other car, and I travel, you know, around everywhere now the past year, driving all of these new electric cars. I've driven the Polestar 3 on multiple occasions, the EX30 also on multiple occasions. I've driven the Polestar 4 on multiple occasions. I've driven the Audi Q6 and SQ6 e-tron on multiple occasions. A lot of cars that are in this price point that don't tickle my fancy in the same way as this. Yes, I go abroad to these beautiful events, but then I come back here to where I live. And I get back into this car and I drive down the road and I'm like, yeah, I like this better than anything else I've driven in the past few years. So why would I not cancel my order? Because I get reminded every time I get back into this car that this is, for me, the best driving, like dynamically, one of the most comfortable, by far the nicest and most special feeling interior. And it looks great, and it has 800 volt architecture, it charges at 270 kilowatts, 10 to 80% the fastest of basically any electric car that isn't a Macan or isn't the new Taycan or an e-tron GT. And also in the real world, this has amazing range. This spec this way has more than 360 kilometers of motorway range in the summer. I did a trip to Trondheim, got really low consumption on Norwegian country roads, where this can do way above 400 kilometers on a single charge. So this is still, after these many years on the market, the best electric car for me. It feels special, it's special to drive. The quality is so fine of the driving experience and the interior experience. Yeah, for me, there just isn't any car that can match this. Why would I sell this at a loss now and buy something more expensive that I may not like? To me, that doesn't make sense. You may believe you can't afford it. Yeah, maybe I can't afford to lose a lot of money on this car and then purchase a new car at an even higher price point and then sell that car in 2 years and lose even more money. Yeah, sure. Maybe I can't afford that, but I don't want to, even if I could afford that, which I'm not saying I couldn't, but I've lost a lot of money the past 10 years buying a lot of cars. But I've gotten all of these new experiences every time and had a blast. But for me, the closest thing to replace this may actually be the new Taycan. Next year maybe, but yeah. I have no plans on replacing this car yet, but I may drive the new EX90 in a few months and love it, and then trade this in within a heartbeat. I may drive the new Macan and love that and trade this in a heartbeat. I may drive something else, maybe the new G-Wagon electric, maybe the new Range Rover electric. There are a lot of cars that can come to market, but as things are now, this, for the 2.5 years I've had it, has been super reliable. It feels almost brand new to drive, even though it almost has 44,000 kilometers on the clock. Yeah, it's an awesome car that I love to death. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below. And for more car content, as always, please subscribe. See you guys later and goodbye.